A very lengthy saga about Kevin and Melanie, my neighbors from heck, by LaShayla Rose, with an update. I moved to a quiet village in England at the beginning of last year. My neighbor on one side is a nice elderly lady who lives alone. We'll call her Edith. We swap baked goods occasionally, and the neighbor on the other side was a middle-aged man. Around February, he got arrested and moved, and the house remained empty until a couple in their late 20s and early 30s popped up. We will call them Kevin and Melanie. It is important to note that I own my home, while their property is managed by a rental company that specializes in providing properties to people who cannot afford deposits. We are terraced houses. This rental company owns everything on the street up to my house. The houses are kinda L-shaped with the bathrooms added to the back downstairs and then a yard bordering the bathrooms, making the properties rectangular. My yard is connected to Kevin and Melanie's yard, and my master bedroom and living room share a wall with their house. My second bedroom, office, bathroom, and kitchen share a wall with Edith. On the other side of Kevin and Melanie are a single mom who I'm friends with, Valerie, and her 16-year-old son, Tom, who is a very nice and respectful young man. Kevin and Melanie introduce themselves the day they move in to me and Edith. They seem fine, and for the first couple of weeks, they remain fine. And then the noises start. At first, it's just very loud TV and music. Occasionally, I hear raised voices and banging of doors. It doesn't bother me much. I spend my time in my second bedroom and office, so the only time I hear much of this is when I walk through the living room and hear the hum of whatever they're listening to. But it is much louder for Valerie and Tom, who share more property walls with them. Then one night, around 1 a.m., I am woken up to the sounds of them doing it so loudly it's as if I'm in the room with them. This becomes a routine. Anywhere between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., I get woken up and have to spend 20 minutes of my life listening to them bang. Sometimes, if I got lucky, it would be 2 or 3 times a night. And then sometimes in the morning between 6 and 9 a.m. Realizing that they are just not going to stop, I knock on their door and try to awkwardly explain to them that the walls are very thin and I can hear everything that goes on in their bedroom overnight. They pretend that they don't understand me, and then they slam the door in my face. Then the blazing rows begin. This couple seem to communicate only through verbally assaulting each other. They take a liking to doing it in the middle of the street, sometimes out the back of their house, sometimes out the front. It becomes apparent that they are taking drugs, and as the days slip past, they become louder and angrier. So I open a noise complaint with the council. Several houses on the street become very quickly fed up with them. After being assigned a nice lady at the council, we go through the process of sending them a warning letter. She tells me they will probably guess it's me because my main complaint is, "Lord, I just want to stop hearing them bone." I say that's fine. It's not fine. The day they receive the letter, I also receive a letter with instructions to download an app to my phone that records their noise. They kick off. Not at me, but at each other. This argument lasts 3 days, and on the 3rd day, I'm sweeping my yard outside when Kevin exits the property. Out of reflex, I say, "Hello." He kindly responds by telling me to freaking chat to me, you freaking snitch, I'll break your freaking neck. I put in a police complaint about threatening behavior, and a couple of days later, an officer comes to my house. I explain everything that is going on to him. He speaks to them, and they deny everything and scream so loudly I can hear them in my house. The officer comes back to mine, weary, and says he's told them to knock off their behavior and he's sorry he can't do more. I say that's fine. Once again, it's not actually fine. By this point, they have also gotten a puppy to add to the nighttime noise routine. At one point, I have to call in sick to work because the puppy has spent all night crying and howling, leaving me awake for bordering 24 hours. Meanwhile, both me and Valerie have been making solid complaints to the rental company, the police, and the council. The police are at Kevin and Melanie's house roughly 3 to 4 times a week for, well, I don't know what reasons. Through sheer coincidence, I stumble on their Facebook accounts and discover that they have 2 kids that have been removed from them. I wonder why. Kevin has multiple Facebook accounts. Melanie's account is just covered with pics of her kids covered in hearts, making posts about how hard it is to be a mom. I am Thanos snapped out of existence simply through the sheer power of cognitive dissonance. Suddenly, the puppy vanishes, inspiring another days-long fight after it emerges that Kevin sold it without Melanie's knowledge to afford something. Neither Kevin nor Melanie work, and this is often a fight between them two. I continue my council noise recordings. Their constant fighting does not improve the nightly sessions for me, although you might think that it would. The council lady comes out to install a decibel monitoring box in my house. On the day she comes, Kevin and Mel are having an absolute rager in the street, and she texts me to ask me to come out of my house and get her because she is frightened of getting out of her car. She installs the box, and the monitoring continues. A while later, one evening, Valerie goes out shopping at the local supermarket. Tom, being 16, takes a bath and plugs his phone into a speaker so he can listen to music. Kevin and Melanie decide that Tom's music is too loud for their taste. Instead of handling it like normal people, they wait until Valerie is pulling up in her car outside and then kick off outside, screaming that they'll screw her up, that he has just gotten out of prison and Mel is pregnant and he must protect his prego fiancé. Yikes. The police are called. They deny everything except that Valerie's Ring doorbell camera records everything. The police take what they can and pop away after warning Mel and Kevin not to interact with Valerie or Tom or any of their family who comes to visit. You and I both know that Mel and Kevin do not stick to this. Eventually, it gets far enough that the council lady informs me that she's been in contact with the rental agency and the police, and they are putting a community protection order on them. She sends them a letter telling them to knock off all their shenanigans. The lettings agency asks the landlord if he wants to evict, but I don't hold high hopes on that one, as I assume the landlord will want his sweet rental paychecks. That weekend, I am out doing some maintenance in my garden when they arrive home with a friend and have a loud and pointed discussion about how it is illegal to record people without their consent and how their friend fixes windows for a living, and if anyone gets their windows broken, he would ensure that no one in the area would come out for it because everyone knows him. I don't know him. I ignore them, I finish my maintenance, and as I am going back inside, Melanie hisses, "Disgusting lesbian," at me. I'm not a lesbian, readers and listeners, but I do have a visible pride flag in one of my windows. That night, they roam the streets and threaten Valerie's brother as he rides his bike up to see her. So, after this, I call the police again. So does Valerie. Valerie, by this point, has also involved her son's social worker, as Tom has learning disabilities and sometimes spends time in respite care, and his social worker is responsible for making sure that he lives in a safe environment. The social worker, Henry, after witnessing firsthand Mel and Kev's shenanigans, also decides that he's going to get the police involved. I decide to buy a camera for my backyard. I don't believe that Kevin and Melanie will do anything, but since they don't like being illegally recorded for the council, I'll do it some more. The police make an appointment to come see me on Tuesday. Me, Tom, and Valerie install my camera in my backyard on Monday. Kevin and Melanie come outside to watch us, so we have a loud and pointed discussion about the features of the camera, such as motion detection and anti-tampering devices. Because I know it ticks them off, and by this point, I decide that I'm allowed to be petty. I angle the camera on the wall so it covers my whole backyard, but none of theirs. But if you looked at the camera itself, you might think it does. So, Tuesday rolls around. I arrive home from work. It becomes apparent that they are in the middle of one of their ding-dong rows. Melanie is stalking the back street, screaming about how they are finished. I have no idea how long this has been going for or what happened, but I know the police officer is coming and that this bodes ill. The officer arrives at my house about an hour later. We have a long discussion. He goes to see Valerie and Tom, and they discuss things too. Edith knocks on my door and asks for my help with her mobile phone and tells the officer some things that she's seen and heard. He asks me if he speaks to Kev and Mel, what sort of outcome do I want? I tell him that I want them to pretend that I do not exist, do not speak to me or about me or in my vicinity. I want to live in peace and quiet and for them to just shut up. That's it. I don't think this is unreasonable, but I do warn him about the argument earlier and the fact that I do not know if they are home right now. Officer goes to knock on their door. They are, in fact, home, and they lose their utter minds. Valerie texts me as the screaming begins, but from our houses, we cannot hear exactly what is being said. I pick up a few words here and there, but nothing that would allow me to string together the conversation. We wonder if the officer is going to call for more officers and other neighbors start opening doors in the street to check what the heck is going on. Eventually, Melanie slams the door in the officer's face, and he simply gets in his car and drives away. About an hour later, he calls me back, opening with the line, "Well, they are charming, aren't they?" which makes me feel vindicated just a little bit. He tells me they denied saying anything to me and that because there is no evidence, he can't progress with my complaint, which is fair and reasonable and what both me and the officer thought would happen. He does, however, then tell me that they complained to him about the camera that I put up the previous day in my yard. Their opinion is that I am recording them in their back garden, and that is illegal. But the officer disagreed and tells me that this really upset them, and they have said that they are going to make a complaint to the police separately about my camera, but not to worry about it because I'm not doing anything wrong and I installed it for my own safety. An officer might come to my house, but they will likely say the same thing. I tell him that I'm more than happy for them to come and look at my camera, and he wishes me well and hangs up. On Wednesday, I arrive home from work and pop into my kitchen to make a coffee. Seconds later, Kev and Mel arrive in their garden to watch me. It is just peeing down with rain. They have clearly been waiting for this all day. I do not look at them. I make my coffee and leave, and they go back inside. Today's Thursday. It's 3:30. They've been slamming doors and shouting at each other up and down the road. I am very tired, but they did not do stuff last night, so I got 10 hours of sleep. At this point, I think I'm simply going to have to put up with this until they start getting fines and arrest. But I'm super open to ideas that'll expedite the process, and, well, it was cathartic to write this all down, and I could use some virtual padding. The brand new update. So, what can I tell you guys? I got home today from work, and they have vanished. All the windows and the blinds are open, and the house is empty. No one on the street saw them leave. Edith saw the man walking into town this morning with a letter in his hand, but that was it. I'm assuming they had a van drive up the back streets in order to get all the furniture out, but my camera didn't catch anything. There is nothing left except trash all over the floor of the living room and some of the kitchen. They left dog crap all over the yard. The gate is broken, but they must have untied it, and it's just miserably swinging in the breeze. I did phone the lettings company to let them know, as yesterday they were offering Avon catalogs to people on the road, but I probably won't find out what happened. It's none of my business. If I had a guess, I knew that in special circumstances, the lettings agency could order a 48-hour eviction notice. So I am wondering if they received that and have appropriately Thanos snapped themselves out of my life. They may still be in the area, but I honestly don't care. I am free. It is over. I have ordered myself a celebratory KFC. As much as I want to know what happened for sure, I'd just be glad that they were gone. OP, so glad to hear that everything is good, and what a pleasant surprise for you. My racist, thieving, trespassing neighbors, posted by Gingerbread1313. This is going to be a long one, but I'm angry, so here we go. For some context, I, a female in my 20s, moved some states over for college, but it didn't work out as I struggle immensely with anxiety and depression. When my mom came out to visit me, she discovered that my apartment basement was filled with mold and had the crazy idea to buy me a fixer-upper home for stability while I got better. Her plan worked, by the way. I graduated and I'm now working in a hospital and beginning to pay my mom back. I know her plan was crazy, and so much. I am forever grateful for the chance that she gave me because I would not be here today without it. But I digress. In the summer of 2021, we found a house, cute little Italianate built in 1869. Needed a ton of work, like electricity, bathrooms, and kitchens. This was a fixer-upper. But I loved it, and my mom loved it because we like old things. The best part of the house is it can easily be divided into a duplex, and we plan on renting one half out. There was one problem though. There was a garage almost behind my house that the realtor claimed was our garage, which made sense. It was so close to the house. We didn't think much of it. My mom bought the house and I moved in January of 2022. 2 weeks after I moved in, my next door neighbors, renters, moved in next door. Straight away, they were parked in front of my garage. So I went out to inform them as politely as I could that it was my garage and they could please park elsewhere. My neighbor, a male in his 30s, let's call him Gunner because he has an equally stupid macho name in real life, told me that I was wrong and explained to me that the property line was at this weird angle, so even though the garage was behind my house, it was on his property. I was so shocked, but he showed me a tax map and he was correct. He pointed to some old standalone fence posts between my backyard and his driveway and garage, fence posts that I previously assumed were remnants of a backyard enclosure, not a property division, and he noted that they were at a slight angle like the tax map. He was right. So I stood at the end of the driveway with him and adjusted where I stood until the fence post lined up with my eyeliner. "So this must be the property line?" I asked him, to which he immediately denied it, because I was standing in the middle of his driveway. He went on to claim that the property line must either go through my house or around my house, since the driveway was 100% his, apparently. Further, he claimed that his landlord promised him they could park their cars side by side, implying parking in my driveway in front of my house, which was ludicrous, although a neighbor later informed me he saw them doing just that at one point. So we're at an impasse here. Gunnar had shown me the tax map, and it seemed clear that the diagonal line did intersect the driveway halfway, judging by the old fence post and the way his garage, my shed, and my house were all lined up. But he claimed the entire driveway was his, so we had to clear this up, and fast. How to do that the best? My mom hired a surveyor. That was a thing itself. When the surveyor found the property stake completely on the other side of Gunnar's driveway, showing the skew was more diagonal than the tax map showed, Gunnar decided it was a good idea to go outside and scream and yell at the surveyor like a toddler that, "This can't be right. If this is right, then I don't have a driveway." Reader, they had plenty of space for a new driveway. But the survey was right. The fence posts were actually off kilter. Gunnar continued to harass me, even going so far as going outside late at night to watch me park, to ensure that I didn't park on his property, I suppose. He and his girlfriend, Karen, had continued to yell and harass me over the property, even after we all knew it was mine. I even found it ridiculous they cared this much, since they are simply renting the house and the landlord didn't seem to care at all whenever we contacted him, but I digress. We got approval from the landlord to properly mark the boundary line, and in doing so, Gunnar came out to scream at us that we were breaking the law, that changing the tax maps was illegal, and my mother suggested that if we were breaking the law, we could call the police for him, and that shut him up rather quickly. From then on, things quieted down a bit. I ignored the jerks next door, they ignore me, and life moved on. Slowly though, they began to forget. They drove over all the property markers that we set up, destroying them. Staying on your own driveway must be absolute rocket science, judging by how hard it was for these people to do. But one day, Gunnar saw me in the backyard and randomly proclaimed that we were too close to neighbors to hate each other. I was all too eager to bury the hatchet, so I immediately agreed and we began to talk. While talking, he complained about the whole situation, making my mother out to sound like a crazy woman who was in the wrong, and he admonished me for daring to call the police since he and the cops don't mix. I'm no fan of cops either. What else was I supposed to do? Well, I am non-confrontational and anxious, so I sort of crumpled and apologized for every single thing. It was in this conversation that he casually revealed that he occasionally steals my firewood for his fire pit. I was shocked. I had noticed absent-mindedly before that the woodpile was smaller than I remembered, but this made it click in my mind. Gunnar and Karen have a fire pit, but they don't have any wood of their own. At the time, it looked like that they had stolen 30 to 50 logs, including all the logs that I had split into quarters for my own wood-burning fireplace. Gunnar invited me over that same night for beers in his garage with him and Karen and some of their friends. I was still in shock over the firewood, but I agreed. Of course, at the small party, Gunnar and his friends proceeded to steal 3 logs while I was there. All the while, Karen was desperately whispering through clenched teeth that I was sitting there. Obviously, someone knew it was wrong, but she didn't apologize either. Besides that, it was an awful party. Gunnar is extremely racist, referring to rap music as a slur, and then saying that slur no less than 20 times the entire time I was there. In front of his young children, no less. He and Karen repeatedly swore and cursed and made sexual jokes and references in front of children as young as 2, which I found highly inappropriate and distasteful, but maybe that's just me. I left the event not knowing what to do, but I worked up the courage the next day to ask him kindly to no longer steal. Karen didn't even look at me, and all Gunnar did was laugh it off and say that he had stolen one too many. I took a photo of my woodpile for comparison purposes further on and went about my life. I graduated school, I got a job, and finally had the time to check the pile today. And what do you know? 20 to 40 logs gone. I lost it. Right after doing a freaking blood donation, I moved all the firewood inside the shed, and I locked the shed with a brand new padlock. I'm so done with these people. There's so many other details that I left out, but Gunnar constantly claimed everyone loved him so much. Wonder how much they'll love him when I tell all the kindly neighbors how big of a racist, lying thief that he is. Can't wait for the shed. Also, I want to note that after finding out that he stole from me months ago, I didn't tell anyone, wanting to give Gunnar the opportunity to do something as simple as not steal. I also forgot to mention that they keep their dogs chained up outside all year, even in the New England winter. Not huskies or anything, mind you, short-haired, sweet dogs. Sean BZA in the comments says, "Hi Sean, why have you not both laid a charge against them and recorded them screaming at you and gotten at least the paperwork started for the landlord to either evict them or sit with a lawsuit is silly. You need to stop letting them run over you and get both cameras, cheap enough now, to record them stealing the wood and tell their landlord that you're going to hold him accountable for any time they either steal your wood or trespass on your property or scream at you or drive onto your property." OP says, "Unfortunately, there's nothing to do about the dogs. We tried. I live in a small town and there's no law about tying your dogs up outside. Stand your ground, OP, because if you don't, he's going to continue to take advantage of you. How would you handle this if you were OP?" Multiple parts with a crazy fallout at the end. Entitled Neighbor, Part 1, posted by Ellen Gass. My parents, until recently, lived in the same house for 50 plus years. We had 3 neighbors on the north side over that time. The first was a little old woman we'll call Eleanor. She was a hermit, and as such, us young kids were always scared of her. She died when I was a freshman in high school. It took a few years, and then we had a new guy buy the property named Richard. One day, we found him cutting down bushes on our property. The houses had about 10 feet between them. Our property line was 6 feet from our house, and he had 4 feet. The bushes were 1 foot into our property. Eleanor never had an issue with them. She was a nature lover. She never mowed her backyard. She only mowed the front. It was a push mower, non-power, at 6 a.m. My dad and I confronted him and let him know that those were our bushes that he was cutting down, and we were not happy about it. He didn't care. He needed to do it so that he could get his cars into his backyard. We said, "You have a curb cut out on the other side of your house. You can mow it and have a straight access to the backyard as the original builder intended." He stormed off, and the next day, the bushes were all gone. We watched him drive his cars on our property to his backyard. Oh yeah, these were the cheap Porsches of the mid-1980s, base model 944s. Then Dad and I decided that we needed metal fence posts to mark the property line. We put them 5 inches on our side of the property line and drove them down really deep. There was very little room for him to get anything past them, especially his cars. When Richard got home, we could hear the yelling and cussing for quite a few hours. And then we heard a car start up in the back, and he successfully got one of his cars out, but not with serious damage to the side. Nice sized scrapes all along the side of the car. Our newly planted fence leaned in toward our property. I really wish at that time that we had stuff we have today. I'd really like to have a video of that. In any event, we contacted police about the damage of our property, our newly constructed fence, and they gave him a ticket. He tried to claim that we damaged his car and that the officer pointed out that he had no right to use our property unless we gave permission, and it's obvious that we had not. He got the other car out not too long after. Same deal, scraped sides to all heck. This was just the beginning of the issues that we had with him. Now this is going to include the fence. Ultimately, we pulled out the metal fencing and put in treated wood fence posts. We sunk them 4 feet into the dirt and then used a wood lattice panel between them. All of this was up to city code at the time. We also extended the fence well into the front yard. Again, Richard was ticked. He began stacking concrete, rocks, and wood up against the fence, which is still 5 inches inside of our property line. Over time, it made the fence sag more into our yard, and he continued to pile it higher and higher until one day the fence broke. All of his crap fell into our yard. Dad wasn't home at the time, so I took it upon myself to relocate everything back into his yard. So one by one, it all ended up near his front porch. As I was getting close to being done, he steps out of his house as a nice-sized rock happens to hurtle right by him. Well, this ticked Richard off. Cops were called, and they arrived after I had finished relocating everything. When the cop came to interview me, I just pointed to the fence that was damaged. The weight of the crap that he kept putting up against the fence that was well within our property line caused it to fail, I said. I was just relocating the mess that spilled into our yard back into his. By this time, the cops had been out a few times and knew what was going on. They pointedly asked if he had caused the broken fence, and I said yes. It was the truth. I explained what had happened. They dismissed my throwing a rock at him and wrote a citation for destruction of property. He was fuming when the cops left, and as he usually would do, he left for a couple of hours. Dad got home and I told him the story, and we had a good laugh. Now this was a fun one too. Richard acquired some signs that said no parking by the order of the police and put them out front of his house. At that time, I was driving an old 4-cylinder Datsun pickup, green for those who need that, and I was parking out front of our house. The neighborhood, over the years, has moved from single family to students renting places. We live in a college town and we're an easy walking distance to the school. We had a lot of students parking on our street, so sometimes my truck was parked out in front of our house or in front of his. With my sister now driving as well, it was just easier to park on the street instead of playing Tetris with cars. Anyway, a few days after the signs popped up, I noticed he was still parking his cars, with the scrape marks still on the side of them all, out front. Okay, fair game. I parked out there as well. He called the cops, and the ticket lady came out and issued me a ticket. When I asked her why, she pointed at the signs. I asked if they were official and if he had the permit for them, and she checked, and no, in fact, he did not. Then the cop showed up. He was questioned why he needed the signs and how he acquired them. He pointed to his house. Let me get sidetracked for a moment. He had been working on renovating his house for 2 years at this point. The house was small, like efficiency apartment small. 1 or 2 main rooms, a bathroom, and so on. I had been in the house on a few occasions when Eleanor was living there. He had this, I don't know what to really call it, like a beam. It was meant to lift his roof while he did the internal work on the house. It extended 10 feet out front and back. This beam was constructed of repurposed wood, small pieces and large pieces, scraps of all kinds. It looked like a puzzle, and while it may have carried a load, it was not structurally sound. It was a local joke about what he was doing and how. Now it reminded me of the forts that we would build at a friend's house, where any piece of scrap wood was fair game and it could be made to work. Back to the story. He got 2 tickets from the cops and 3 from the city. One, I overheard, was for no permit. Now this one happened after most of the other stuff and near the end of his time there. I worked as a student operator in a computer lab. I had the late shift a number of nights of the week. It was good money for babysitting computers. Since it was a college campus, we had to park a fair distance away. One night, I looked up and happened to see Richard in the lab. I should also mention that by this time, we had a full family no contact order on him. I didn't think he was a student, but we got a lot of non-students in the lab since we had publicly accessible computers. No logins needed to use them. He was typing like it was going out of style. Then he got up and he left. We did have cameras at the entrances, so I saw him leave. I went over to his machine and I pulled the file from the trash that he'd been working on. I printed a copy out and I read it. It was about all the trouble that the neighbors were making. Hey, that's us, and how he can't get anything done because we keep turning him in. Then the letter went legal. He was trying to write like it was a letter from a lawyer or something. I laughed it off. He didn't show up again that I recall when I was there. One night a few weeks after that, I signed out of my shift and I went home. It was after 1 a.m. I noticed him sitting in the parking lot in one of his cars, smoking. Okay, I thought to myself, this is interesting. I hopped in my Datsun pickup and started it up, and it was loud. My muffler had finally let go. I took off out of that lot, trying to not over-rev to make it loud at 1 a.m. for anyone but me. I noticed that he took off at the same time and went the same direction. Okay, this is the way home, but I decided to test to see if he was following me, and yup. I took the most out of the way home, using main streets instead of the side streets, which would have been like 10 times quicker, only to have him keep on following. I went around the block close to the house to make sure that I wasn't dreaming this, and no, he followed me right to the house. I parked in the driveway this time, and he parked where he could in front of his house. I woke Dad up, and then we called the cops. I told the cops that I was taking a long way home due to the muffler and not wanting to tick anyone off, but that I also did a loop around the block, and sure enough, he was following me. They arrested him for a no-contact violation, and when I told them about the previous encounter the weeks before at work, they added a second charge. When it went to court, I wasn't the only one there to testify. They lumped another case of his in with it: destruction of public property. After all that had happened, he no longer had a driver's license. He got ticked because he had to take public transportation. He got even more ticked when the driver wouldn't stop between two stops to let him out. He kicked the windows out of the bus. He went to jail for about 3 months. After that, he lost the house and his cars. We would see him from time to time walking all over town, banned from the bus, banned from his house, and his cars. Overreacting, posted by Patient Leopard 2704. We moved into our house about 16 months ago. 3 months after we moved in, we had our first baby. Our neighbor's property is very close to our son's nursery, and they have a pool. We quickly learned in the summer that they had frequent parties with grandkids, lots of screaming and so on, which we could live with. All was fine until about 2 months later, they bought an enormous RV that sits directly next to our property line. When they have it extended, it's literally in our front yard. So much so that we can't cut the grass unless they put the extension in, and even then it's still a challenge. When they bought it, they immediately came over to apologize and stated it wouldn't be extended unless their grandchildren were over. He also said that he would take care of the grass. Neither turned out to be true. It was always extended, and he frequently would wait weeks to take care of the lawn. We had a brand new baby, so it really wasn't a priority of ours. Fast forward to this year. All was fine until RV shows up last month. Same song and dance as last year. Have to ask him to move the extension to cut our lawn. Frequent and late pool parties with kids screaming. Now that our son is 1, noise is more of a concern, especially at 9 and 10 o'clock at night. Additionally, he was doing work on his shed and left a bunch of debris in our yard that we cleaned up. Guests always park in front of our house, and when we take walks, they obstruct their driveway so that we have to go on the street. Last night, they had another party, and when we got home, there were a total of 12 cars on the street. They were all in front of our house, and we couldn't even back into our driveway. The RV extended into our yard. It was excessive. The cars were only in front of our house, not the opposite neighbor. While they have told us before, we are good neighbors, and we try to be quiet for your baby, it just seems inconsiderate. Especially having to ask your neighbor to move their crap so you can mow your own lawn. Pastor's wife hops our fence, calls the cops on us, and maybe more, posted by Social Anxiety Kyle. My wife and our kids, all under age 10, went on vacation to Florida. While we are gone, I have my parents coming over twice a day to feed them, dogs, and give them water when they need it. The dogs are outside, but they have access to a large backyard and sunroom. They're living the life, basically. Also important to note that we live in a nice area. It's a decent house in a cul-de-sac in a small town in Indiana. I get a call from my neighbor, who is a pastor, and he tells me that our dogs have been barking at night and keeping our surrounding neighbors awake. He also said that it didn't look like our dogs had been getting fed or watered, and that his wife went into our 8-foot-tall fenced backyard to give the dogs water and food. He tells me that his wife told him this as he isn't home and he has been out of town for work while we were on vacation. So, he's calling me to report what his wife told him. Thought it was kind of odd because his wife has my wife and I's phone numbers. I played it off that she didn't like confrontation. To me, it wasn't that much of a confrontation, but whatever. I also thought going in our backyard was a little much, but I'm friends with my pastor neighbor, so I just kind of brushed it off. So I tell my pastor neighbor, "Thanks for letting me know. I appreciate you having the stones to let me know. I don't want to be a bad neighbor. I'll have my parents put the dogs in the garage at night so they won't bark, and that the dogs have been fed by my parents every day since we've been gone." And I thought that that was the end of it. Not even close. I get a call from my parents a few hours later when they came to our house to feed the dogs. They said they pulled up our mountain of a driveway, and as soon as they got out, my neighbor from directly across the street started screaming at them about how the dogs aren't being fed or watered. I still don't understand why they're saying this. If you went in our backyard, you'd see a plethora of food and water in the sunroom. When my parents started heading to the backyard, they thought they heard something. My dad creeps his head over the fence to see my neighbor, pastor's wife, in our backyard. He tells her to get out and threatens to call the police as she is trespassing. She leaves. Remember, this is all after my conversation with my pastor neighbor and after he reported what I said to his wife. My parents are in the backyard dealing with the dogs and notice that they called the police. My parents at this point are waiting for the officer to stop talking to the neighbors and come to my house. He finally does. The first thing the officer says to my parents is, "You got some nosy butt neighbors." He explains what they said, and my mom invites him into my house and into my backyard to show him that the dogs are being taken care of. At first he declines, saying that he believes my parents, but eventually he came inside. My parents had a good conversation with him. He talked about how my family and I don't need to worry about this, and that we should be having fun on vacation. He even opened up about his family and his little girl. This is nuts, and I'm ticked at my neighbors for all this crap at this point. We finally come home from vacation and are home for 3 weeks, and I still haven't seen my neighbors, which is odd. My neighbor to the left of us walks his dog frequently, and I see him almost every day. I haven't seen him at all. So I text my pastor neighbor, and I say, "How's it going?" Because he hasn't said anything to me since I figured out his wife hopped our fence again, and that she called the police. So he has the idea for me and him to talk in person. So we start talking in my front yard, and he starts telling me everything that happened. Once again, he wasn't home, so this is what he knows from his wife. He apologizes for his wife. Weird, why isn't his wife apologizing to us? And he tells me the same information that I've already shared, except 3 things. First off, his wife accidentally let the dogs out and she took them inside their house for a bit. They were back in our backyard before my parents got there and before we got back. Weird, but whatever, I guess. Then he mentions that he and his wife have a rule that she isn't allowed to drink unless he is home, and that one of the days that we were gone, she had been drinking. This was news to me. And then he told me what the cop said to the group of neighbors that were speaking with the cop. He said it like this: "I'm telling you this because you're my friend and there's no judgment here and you take it how you want." The cop said that when he went into your house, he had to hold his nose, it smelled so bad. It was unsanitary, and that the cop said this is a house they know about and used the term drug house to describe my home. I felt good about the conversation except that last part. So I questioned him on that again, and I said, "Did the cop only say this to your wife, or were there more neighbors?" He told me that it was her and my neighbor to the left of me that heard this. Red flags are going off in my head as I walk back to my house. We have 3 young kids, so our house isn't super clean, but it's not too bad and it's definitely not unsanitary. Also, why would an officer leave my house after talking to my parents and say that about our house to our neighbors? An officer's job is to de-escalate the situation, and this just didn't seem like something an officer would do or say. Not to mention, none of it is even remotely true. The next day, I get a text from my pastor neighbor saying this. Kyle, thanks for your time yesterday. I appreciate friends being able to weigh into awkward issues. On another note, though the police officer did say the things I shared with you, it really wasn't germane to the conversation or issue at hand, Kyle. I didn't need to share those things. My apologies, bro. Now, I'm really questioning if the officer said this. This is a weird thing to even apologize for. Even if you think, I shouldn't have mentioned that part, why would you take the time to apologize for it? I responded very honestly and said, hey, I appreciate you willing to face confrontation. And no, I'm glad you shared with me what the police said. I don't believe they said that in the slightest amount for many reasons, to be, completely honest. It may have been best for me to keep my opinion to myself, but I was still kind of ticked off. He replies, hey Kyle, just to be clear, your text is saying that the police officer didn't say that, which means that you're saying my neighbor to the left and my wife misheard the officer, or worse, made that up. He tells me to question my neighbor to the left about it and to give him a call. I give my pastor neighbor a call, but he doesn't answer and never calls me back. So I text him saying that I plan to ask my left neighbor and I hope that this is all a misunderstanding. I also mentioned that if the officer did say that, then that would be defamation of character, so I want to know what was said. He replies, geez Kyle, what's your goal in all of this? I explained to him that this is not something I want spread around like it has, because I have 3 young kids. I don't want to have to deal with CPS or have my kids be bullied at school for a stinky house or have my reputation soiled over this false nonsense, as my job involves me going to schools around the country and working with teens. He has never replied to this answer. A few days later, I meet up with my left neighbor in my front yard and I talk about everything. I specifically ask him if he was outside and talking to the officer when he left our house from talking to our parents. He said yes. I questioned him on what the officer said, and he said something similar to what my pastor neighbor said, but different enough to know that there is some shenanigans going on. He tells me that the officer told him that the house smelled like MJ when he walked in. He says that he didn't say drug house specifically, but he did say something about MJ. My left neighbor didn't seem to know exactly what was said and was vague about this all. He also said that the officer said our house was known well by the police department. So my wife and I are trying to figure out how we learn the truth because something fishy is going on here. She has a friend that is a cop in another county and he gives us some advice. First, he tells us that there is no way in heck the officer said that to our neighbors. Second, he tells us that we can call the sheriff's department and they will have that same officer give us a call. So, after 3 days of playing phone tag, we finally get in touch with this officer. We start telling him what the neighbors are saying about what he said, and he cuts us off and starts laughing, saying that none of that was ever said. He says, I know what a drug house is, and your house is not it at all. No one knows about your house, and we don't have suspicion of anything at all. Never said it stunk or anything like that. All I said was that the dogs were taken care of and that the matter was resolved, and then I left. The officer also mentioned that after leaving my house and talking to my parents, he only talked to the wife of my pastor neighbor. My wife and I are relieved now because we were able to confirm that the officer didn't actually say this, but now we are left with another problem. How the heck do we approach this from here? We are 100% for sure that our left neighbor and the wife of our pastor neighbor were lying and making crap up about my house and our family. I don't understand why though. I'm not sure about our pastor neighbor. I feel that he didn't know much and was just being honest the first time that I talked to him in the front yard. After the text messages the day after, I'm not sure if he learned that his wife lied about everything and is trying to hide it, or if he is still clueless on the truth. All I know is that this is freaking nuts. It's been about a week since we've talked to the officer, but I'm not sure how to handle this from here. I'm not sweeping this under the rug. I want to confront them in some capacity and let them know that we know the truth. But it's a mess because I'm friends with my pastor neighbor, not so sure anymore, and I'm not trying to throw a wrench in this guy's marriage, but his wife sputtering this crap about us for no reason is crazy. So here I am, asking for help on how to handle this appropriately, as well as hear your theories. This comment suggests, time to tell the pastor, thanks for telling us your wife has a drinking problem. That explains the lies she's spreading. Would you like the phone number for the officer that was here? He will tell you what actually happened. Also, we'll be installing cameras, so warn your wife to stop trespassing. Amazon theft, posted by CCantaloupe8749. So my neighbor is a total piece of crap. Him and his wife live 2 floors above me on the opposite side of the stairs, which means they have a different doorway to go in. I got a package delivered about 3 weeks ago with a few floral button-down Hawaiian shirts and a black paper towel holder. It was put at their side of the building instead of mine, which happens sometimes and it's never a big deal. People just leave it out there if it's not their stuff. However, when I got home, the package wasn't there. So I know most people in that side of the building, and I asked everyone around where it was, and no one knew or had seen it. Now my girlfriend and I went to a small party that the guy upstairs over there was holding for his wife. Now, I don't know them that well, but we're friendly and we chat with each other a few times a week. When I walked into their apartment, he greeted us at the door and he was wearing the one orange shirt that I ordered. I was in shock when I saw it and I whispered to my girlfriend, "Hey, that was my shirt." She just thought it was a coincidence. And then I walked over into the kitchen and, sure enough, there sat my paper towel holder right there on their counter, holding some paper towels. I was mad at this point and I confronted him the next day because I didn't want to wreck the party. He claimed that he had had that shirt for years and the paper towel holder was just something he picked up in Walmart the other day. I call bullcrap. The audacity of this man to lie about not knowing where my package is and then wear the dang shirt right in front of me. It's unbelievable. He knew I was coming because he's the one that invited me. I'm just very ticked off. I don't really care about the items. I got my money back and I ordered everything again. It was like $45 in total. It's just the principle. This comment gives an answer. It says wear your shirts every chance you get and then point out how it's so amazing that he has all the same shirts that were misdelivered, especially in front of the other neighbors and especially if you're both wearing them. They won't believe his bullcrap. An update from OP says he doesn't acknowledge me when we pass each other anymore since my confrontation. What an idiot. I've never been anything but nice to this jerk, so if he wants a war, he's got one. Next week, our complex has a community day, and I remember him saying that he is going to have a yard sale table. So I signed up for a table, and I requested the one right next to his. I'm going to wear that same orange shirt and see what goes down. Entitled neighbors acting like Karens, posted by Cupid Fox. So recently, our neighbors got a baby. To be fair, I didn't know our neighbor was pregnant. We barely saw her and her kids and boyfriend, so it really came to me as a surprise. It's all good and fun when you have a baby, but the literal disrespect and entitlement is what puts a bad taste in my mouth. For instance, Ken, Karen's boyfriend, would come out to yell at my younger brothers, aged 9 and 6, to keep it down. Not say it in a nice, calm tone or anything, straight up yelling at them. Another time, my mother overheard Karen ranting to her mother about how noisy my brothers were, to which my mom interfered and gave Karen a piece of her mind, and I was just standing there enjoying the show. Karen said, "You know we have a baby, it needs to be quiet, otherwise our baby won't be able to sleep. Be considerate of others and don't act selfish." My mom said, "Considerate? Selfish? You have the stroller in the way towards the basement. I have to push it aside to access it to get my bike out of it every time. You place the bikes you don't use in the bike parking spot despite others who use their bikes needing these spots, because some of them have chain locks and they won't be able to lock their bikes safely because you occupy them, and you clearly see that our bikes are in the basement, which, by the way, we use daily, yet you push our bikes aside from their spots just to place your crap there. You don't live alone in this house, other people do live here too. We haven't said anything and we have to be considerate of you? What about us? You act like you own this house, and just because you have a baby, you can do whatever you want." She replies, "I'll talk to the landlord about your awful behavior, just you wait." Typical Karen behavior, honestly. My mom and I went to buy groceries after that. We then walked inside and my mom said jokingly, "OP, don't be so noisy. The baby won't be able to sleep if you walk upstairs so loudly." I had to chuckle as we heard Karen yell, "If you have to say something, say it to my face." To which my mom replied, "I was talking to my son, not to you." And finally, this happened last week. My brothers went upstairs as they came from school, and suddenly Ken came out and yelled, "Can you shut the heck up?" My mom, like the boss she is, responded with, "How about you shut the heck up? You're being the loudest here right now." To which Ken replied with, "Why don't you get down here then?" My mom scoffed, telling him that she didn't stoop that low to his level and that he should shut the heck up. He did eventually shut the door, and for some reason, he always has to yell at my siblings when he believes my parents or I aren't around. Joke's on them though, we don't let these entitled neighbors get their way. They want to be petty? Fine, so are we. Two can play at this game. I've lived nearly my entire life in this building. I witnessed neighborly drama all the time, and yet, never ever had they taken our family down. It's funny because that family makes themselves the entire neighborhood's enemy. Drunk Karen accuses my front waiter and I of theft, ends up embarrassing herself, posted by Gold and Silver 61. Back in 2014, I was a back waiter on a cruise ship in Hawaii. The ship was in port on the northern island of Kauai, and my front waiter, who we will call Phil, not his real name, and I were working the dinner shift in the main dining hall. It was a typical steady evening until two ladies were seated in our section. One of the ladies, the Karen of this story, obviously had a little too much to drink. Red in the face, drunk and giggling, you get the idea. During the dinner, the two ladies were having a great time, smiling, laughing, and enjoying themselves. They were actually quite pleasant to wait on. The two ladies finished their dinner and left without an incident happening. Phil and I continued working, but about 20 to 30 minutes later, the drunk Karen returns. She walks right up to me and says, "My purse is missing." I replied, "Well, no one has sat at the table that you and your friend were at since you left, so let's go over there and see if you left your purse behind." I started looking around the table, and the drunk Karen shouts, "Don't look for my purse there." This startled me. After a moment of being a deer caught in headlights, I ask her, "Ma'am, this is where you and your friend ate your dinner, right? If you don't want me to look for your purse here, where should I be looking?" She says, "You and your other waiter took it, and I want it back right now." "Ma'am, we didn't take your purse. Is it possible you might have left it in your cabin?" This ticked the drunk Karen off, and she snapped back, "How dare you ask me such a stupid question? I would know if I left my purse in my cabin. I know you two took it, and I want it back right now." With her screaming, anyone and everyone who could hear her were now looking at us. Phil rushes over to try and calm her down while I went to find the restaurant manager. I filled him in on what was going on, and while walking back towards Phil and the drunk Karen, I warned him, "Hey, whatever you do not ask her if she left her purse in her cabin. I did, and it only made her mad." The manager thanked me for the warning, but told me that he had to ask her that as part of the line of questioning that he had to do in this situation. Sure enough, the drunk Karen got even more ticked off when he asked her that question. So now we have a full-scale investigation on our hands. Our section had to be closed down. The passengers dining in our area were inconveniently moved to other sections of the restaurant, and the security team had to come in and question all of us. Drunk Karen got even more ticked off when the security team asked her if she left her purse in the cabin. After the questioning, the security team split up. Some went to go look for the drunk Karen's friend for additional questioning, while the rest went to look over the security footage. They told us this will take some time, as there are multiple cameras that overlapped our section, and they had to review not only the dinner, but the 20 to 30 minutes after the dinner when drunk Karen and her friend left the restaurant to when she returned to see if we stole the purse. But they assured her that if we did steal it, they will see it in the footage. So now it's just the restaurant manager, one security guard, drunk Karen, Phil, and myself, waiting around in our empty section for the security team to finish their investigation. The manager and security officer did a good job keeping drunk Karen calm for a while, but she eventually lost her patience and screamed, "Why is this taking so long? I know those two stole my purse, and I want it back right now. If you delay any longer, I will call the cops, have them come on board to arrest those two, and I will sue this cruise line." Upon hearing this, Phil had enough, and he started yelling back at drunk Karen. I pulled him off to the side to try and calm him down, but he gets upset at me and says, "How can you be so calm? That lady is threatening to call the cops and have us arrested. Aren't you the least bit worried that we could be going to jail?" "Why should we be worried?" I replied. "We didn't steal her purse. The security team will verify this when they finish looking over the security footage. The purse will be found somewhere and everything will be fine, so we have nothing to worry about." This did little to no good calming Phil down, so I decided to change my tactics and said in jest, "Think of it this way. We're both still on the clock. We're getting paid right now to stand around and do nothing while we wait for the security team to finish their investigation. Think of it like we're getting an extra paid break during what would otherwise be a standard busy dinner shift." Phil did not find this amusing, and he yelled back, "Why aren't you taking this seriously? We could be going to jail and you're making jokes. Don't you have any pride? Where's your integrity?" So Phil's yelling at me, drunk Karen is yelling at us, and Phil is yelling back at the drunk Karen. Things were getting out of hand. Fortunately, a short while later, drunk Karen's friend walks back into the restaurant with the missing purse. When asked where she found the purse, you've probably guessed it by now. It was in drunk Karen's cabin the whole time. I didn't think drunk Karen's face could get any more red from the booze she drank and from how angry she was, but she turned 3 shades of red darker from sheer embarrassment. She snatched the purse from her friend's hands and ran out of the restaurant. The friend tried to apologize on drunk Karen's behalf, but Phil rejected it and he yelled out, "That lady came in here, accused us of stealing her purse, threatened to call the cops and have us arrested. Yet when the purse was found, she runs out of here without apologizing to us first. What a bee!" The restaurant manager knew that emotionally Phil was in no condition to keep working, so he told him to clock off for the rest of the night to calm down and that he can clock back in the next day once he's done so. The manager apologizes to me and asked if I could do the close down procedure for our section on my own. I had no problem with this, since when I was done, I would still be clocking off for about an hour earlier than usual. As I was finishing up, the manager calls me into his office and says, "Hey, I want to thank you for how you handled the situation earlier tonight. You were calm and collected while Phil lost his cool. Please don't think I was rewarding Phil by letting him off early for his bad behavior. You acted like the experienced front waiter while he acted like the immature back waiter. He wasn't in the right mindset to continue working tonight, and I promise, in the next week or two, I will find a night to give you off as a reward for how you responded to the situation." Drunk Karen never returned to the main dining hall to apologize in person, but she did write an apology letter which she had her friend deliver on her behalf. Phil was still ticked and wanted to tear up the letter in a horrible rage. This time I managed to calm him down and convinced him to be the bigger man and just accept the letter. It may not be the apology that he wanted, but we are all still receiving an apology in the end. Upper class Karen disrespected my family and then tried to attack me when I retaliated, posted by No State Greenery. So yesterday, my family and I went out for a nice dinner and a trip to the movies. This is something we rarely do, since we live moderately far apart and we all work our own jobs. Our party included my dad, my mom, my sister, and me. Everything was pretty chill and we were enjoying ourselves. The food was nice and the movie was kind of funny. Nobody was expecting what had awaited us just moments later. When the movie ended, we started walking out of our row towards the exit. This cinema is rather small, so there was only one door. When I looked back up to see where the rest of my family was, I saw that my mother was arguing with a couple. The man was a balding middle-aged snob with thick glasses and an oily face. The woman was dressed in a black dress, golden necklace, and had a fake blonde Karen haircut. Both had this unbearable upper-classy, "I'm better than you" feel oozing out of them. It was pretty clear that they didn't want to get up to let my mother pass through. Now, you see, my mother has a medical problem with her knee. She wanted to pass the row in this specific direction so that she doesn't have to huddle through the whole length of the row to get out. She tried to explain this to the woman, Karen, but Karen just made fun of her, taunting her with, "Oh, just climb over me then," and "No, I can't let you pass, I want to see the credits." I saw how, after a while of arguing, Karen put her feet demonstratively on top of the seat in front of her to block my mother's way. My mom was all worked up, crying, and passed me by the exit, taking the long way. I don't take disrespect lightly, and I knew that if I didn't act, this scene would follow me for some weeks. I remembered that I have my water bottle with me, filled to the brim. So I took it out, walked back to where the couple was still sitting, and gave Karen and her boyfriend a refreshing shower directly onto their bellies and laps. They clearly saw me coming and looked at me, all smug and victorious, until the water hit them. Karen and her boyfriend looked shocked and had this "how could you" face on. Her boyfriend, who also yelled at my mom previously, confronted me with a quiet and shaky, "Why would you do that? You can't do that." Because apparently, Karen and her boyfriend never learned that their actions have consequences. As I turned to leave, I saw Karen going full rage mode. She was climbing over her boyfriend in the seats to get to me. Her partner yelled something like, "Karen, please leave it as it is, don't do it." Just as I went through the exit, I realized that she made her way right behind me. I turned and she was standing there with raised fist, like 2 steps apart from me. I looked at her and asked, "Oh, so you want to fight?" And Karen, glaring with the rage of 1,000 sexually frustrated middle-aged women, sputtered, "Yeah, let's fight." I'm a 23-year-old guy, fairly muscular and big into fighting sports. I've been training both Wing Chun and Muay Thai for quite a while now, since it's fun and it adds to my overall fitness. Don't worry, I didn't obliterate Karen. I also didn't really attack her. I just assumed my fighting stance, took a step forward, and asked her again if she really wants to fight. Karen was still there in all her freshly soaked glory, seething with rage. Now, at this point, I kinda wish she would try to hit me so I could bring her down in an elegant self-defense kind of way. But she just stared at me, so I threw a halfway warning shot, kinda center kick in her direction, not hitting her, but to establish distance. Next thing I know is that Karen ran back into the cinema and my sister and mother were getting in my way to end the situation. Karen was hiding behind some people in the cinema, and I shouted something like, "Where are you going, Karen? I thought you wanted to fight." Her balding middle-aged boyfriend walked to the exit, saw me, and went wide-eyed again, completely overwhelmed with this situation. We then turned and left. A very kind woman reassured us that Karen acted weird and uncontrolled. She speculated that Karen was on drugs or something. Well, after all, we got a good story out of our family night, and all Karen and her seemingly enslaved boyfriend got was wet clothes and dirty looks. A fair deal. Update. To all that commented that I escalated the situation, you're absolutely right. This story is about how I reacted right in this moment. You can form your opinion of me based on this story, and that is completely valid. I never was in a situation like this, and I wanted to share my experience. My goal is not to get you to praise me. Based on the comments, there is a large array of different ways on how to act in such occasions. Entitled Karen at a Packed Restaurant, posted by General Snivy. For a bit of background information, before I share this short story, my mother and I went to Pennsylvania to visit my sister for about a week, as we haven't seen each other in person for over 4 years. During one of the last couple of days of our visit, my mother, my sister, one of her friends who she's living with, and I went to a local restaurant that she looked up via Google Maps, as we were looking to try eating at someplace new. Now, I don't remember the exact name of the restaurant, but I do know that it's on the riverside and it has tequila in its name. Now, onto the story. We arrived at the restaurant and parked in a parking lot across the street from the establishment, and we head inside. As we were heading in, we noticed that the restaurant is packed with lots of customers, and the place looks to be understaffed. There didn't seem to be that many waiters and waitresses on duty, but all 4 of us can tell that they are giving it their all to serve these people, despite the circumstances. One thing I was surprised about was that we were able to be seated so quickly, even if the place looks packed to the brim. So we sat down, ordered an appetizer, and waited patiently for it to arrive. During this time, we chatted about some personal things that aren't worth sharing, and when our appetizer arrived, the waitress forgot to give us the cheese sauce that would normally come with our fries. I politely pointed this out to her after she dropped off our food. She apologized, and she went back to the kitchen to get our cheese sauce. No big deal as far as from what I can tell. Our waitress is serving around 7 tables total, including ours. Eventually, we got our cheese sauce for our appetizer and then ordered our main meals. My mom got a baked potato with pork and barbecue sauce inside the potato that was the size of my head. My sister got a sandwich, I can't remember for sure, and some fries. My sister's friend got something else that I can't recall, and I got myself a pepperoni calzone. Our food arrived and everyone's food was correct, except mine. My calzone had ham or salami in it, which is something I don't like. So I politely informed our waitress that my order was wrong and told her what was wrong with it. She apologized and I told her that it wasn't a big deal. She offered to take the calzone back and have the cooks remake it, which I had her do. All seemed good despite the mistakes that were made so far. Considering everything that was going on, dealing with a restaurant that was packed with hungry people and being short-handed, our waitress was handling things like a champ until my mom and sister overheard an entitled Karen over at a table next to us. I didn't hear the conversation myself as I was staring off into space waiting for my food to be remade, which, by the time it was remade, it was done properly, which was nice. From what I heard my mom and sister mention as they were talking to each other, this Karen was complaining about how the food was terrible, the service was sloppy, and how they were going to complain to our waitress's manager about their slow, crappy, poor service. As mom and my sister were conversing, my sister's friend joined in the conversation as well to offer her own input, and as they were talking and taking all this information in, I agreed with everyone in my party that this Karen is just being entitled, and we were practically singing our waitress's praises as she worked her butt off, serving our table, plus several others at the same time. In the end, when we were ready to receive our check and leave, we told our waitress that she did an excellent job that evening. We thanked her for all of her hard work, and we gave her a very generous tip. I think we ended up tipping her $50 that evening, but I could be wrong about that amount. Regardless, we gave her a really good tip, and I strongly believe that we raised her spirits at least a little bit, which felt really good. My sister also offered to stand up for this waitress if she were to receive a complaint from her manager, shift leader, or whoever her boss is, thanks to this entitled Karen. Overall, the food was delicious and the service was top-notch. If Mom and I were to go back to PA again, we'll definitely revisit this restaurant and hopefully not encounter any more Karens who can't appreciate good customer service, even if it's being served right in front of their face. Scary and weird experiences with neighbor, posted by Catbee. Just looking to get some opinions and advice as to what to do to stop this situation from potentially escalating before it does. I live in a large city in a pretty big apartment building with 30 plus floors and tons of units. We have a lobby with very friendly doormen who monitor traffic in and out, and beyond some weird and frightening experiences with the titular neighbor, love the experience of living in this building. My boyfriend and I moved into our current apartment about 4 months ago, and pretty early on, I was alone waiting for the elevator one morning when I hear the very sound of one of the doors opening a little bit. I turn my head and I see our across the hall neighbor just barely peeking his head out from the cracked door. I assume he must have seen me see him because he ducked back in and immediately shut the door. It just immediately gave me the creeps. I can't really describe it. It wasn't like it was his whole head or anything, and his door wasn't open wide enough to actually be able to do anything besides just watch me. I brushed that off, and I went about my day and chalked it up to him just being nosy. Shortly after that, my boyfriend and I started noticing yelling from our neighbor's apartment at all hours of the day. It almost sounded like he was talking on the phone with someone and getting really angry at them. Based on the language he used, it sounded like he was yelling at a woman, but I've never seen anyone else come out of that apartment, and I never heard another voice besides his in these arguments. Again, not sure if he was even arguing with someone or just yelling for the heck of it. About 2 weeks ago, things escalated in a pretty dramatic way. Now, disclaimer, this incident is not confirmed to be the same neighbor, but for reasons I'll go into later, myself and my boyfriend think it is. It was Saturday night, around 3 a.m., and myself and my boyfriend were completely asleep. I was awoken to the sound of what I thought was our TV falling over and breaking, or possibly a window breaking, just some incredibly loud noise. I woke up my boyfriend and he went to have a look around, but didn't find anything. He was heading back to bed when the sound happened again. This time it was obvious where it was coming from: the front door. The door to this apartment is heavy, made entirely of very thick metal, and it was shaking in the frame as what we could only assume to be a large person took a few steps back and threw their weight into it. This happened over and over again, with the door actually moving in its frame with each blow. At that moment, we were truly terrified that someone was trying to break in. My boyfriend rushed to keep the door shut and told me to call the police, which I did. He told me he could feel the door buckling each time this person slammed on it. Within about a minute of the police arriving, the person stopped. When the police showed up, they told us that someone else on the floor had also called to report this same thing happening, but they searched every floor and told us that there was no one suspicious. They also said a doorman was in the lobby all night and no one entered or exited the building who wasn't a resident. They left, and we were still very shaken up, so we sat in the living room for about an hour before trying to sleep again. During this time, we heard the neighbor go in and out of his apartment a couple times, bringing up a doorman once to tell him that his lock was broken. Seems weird to me to figure this out at 4 in the morning, but maybe it isn't. My theory is that he was so turned around for some reason that he thought our apartment or someone else's apartment on our floor was his. He couldn't get in, and then he thought that his lock was broken because of it. The next morning, we spoke to a doorman, and he all but confirmed this theory, though he did seem like he knew more than he was letting on and didn't want to single out this neighbor, rather letting us share what we knew first. He also told us to always call the desk before the police, which seems stupid to me given how aggressively this person was trying to get in. A couple of weeks go by without incident, and then yesterday, we were coming back home to find our neighbor charging his phone in the hallway near our door. No one else on the floor has ever done this, and there were no notices of electrical outages in the building. Generally, the property managers are very good about sharing information if any electrical outage or other building issue is taking place. My first thought is that his electrical is shut off, but I have no idea, and really, that's none of my business, just putting it in here in case it's relevant. The real update from yesterday is that he was, again, watching us as we waited for the elevator. I saw him before my boyfriend did, and he closed the door very quickly. The only difference between this time and last time is I heard him make a ton of noise trying to get the door open, only to peek his head out and watch. I'm just creeped out, and I don't like going into the hallways on my own anymore. I love this apartment otherwise, like I said, just need some advice. This commenter asked OP, are there any security cameras in the common areas? I can't imagine a building would have a doorman but no cameras. And OP says, they told us there are no cameras in the hallway. My boyfriend was too focused on holding the door to get a good look through the peephole either, unfortunately. The cameras in the lobby showed no suspicious activity. Someone else says, my neighbor has an adult grandson who behaves oddly, and sometimes in frightening ways. He is schizophrenic. After trying to understand the condition, it seems the behavior does not mean they are violent human beings, but stuck in a personal heck in their mind. Maybe the doorman is aware? Just giving the possibility. But please always ensure your own safety. I agree with the commenters. Get a peephole camera and let the authorities know. This story has an update. It's called 99% likely that my mom stole $200,000 inheritance from me. I might have to contact a lawyer, but I still feel terrible, even though this is her own dang fault. Posted by Please Insert Disc 2. My dad died 10 years ago. My mom, for the longest time, has always wanted help. There was a time when I had 2 jobs, no car, and I was a full-time student, and I was going to get a haircut, and my mom approached me and said, really? You're supposed to be using that money to help me. She's claimed my dad ruined our credit. Last year, she claimed that dad borrowed $10,000 from my aunt, so she needs help with the money since she has to pay my aunt $10,000 back. I gave her $600 or $700 of my unemployment money, and later on, I find out that she's had her own dang unemployment money. A few weeks ago, though, she changed her story to, I have to pay back Aunt 10 grand a year. At that point, I realized, okay, she's a liar, a huge one. So I go and I check the files cabinet in our house. And what do I find? A trust with like $600,000 in it, and a paper that states that I am a beneficiary of $200,000 of my dad's life insurance. I was supposed to receive that money 8 years ago when I turned 18. I called the insurance company, and they said that they received forms that I supposedly signed and sent in, and they sent out a check, and that they're going to see if it was cashed in or not. But let's be real, who submits forms to receive a check and hides it for 8 years? She obviously cashed it. Whether she placed it into a trust fund or not, I don't know. I feel like that she robbed me of a much easier life. I wouldn't have had to work minimum wage, for instance. I could have focused on school. I could have gotten a car that wasn't holding on for dear life. I could have maintained my dental, mental, and etc. health. So many things. But I still feel guilty that I'm going to be cornering her most likely tomorrow and asking her to fork up that money, otherwise I'll take it to the courts. Part of me feels like that I'm just being a spoiled child, but that's my money. I saw the papers. My dad meant for that money to go to me. She can't even claim that she used that money to help me. Why do I still have student loans? The update. Basically, it took me a very long time to finally accept that nothing I say and do will get through to my mom's head and ego. It was just a year and a half of her attempting to negotiate with me, manipulate, confuse, and isolate me, and so on. I had to go through months of therapy and do lots of introspection and remembering and analyzing my past to really come to this conclusion. I really couldn't believe how weak-minded I was last year. I started talking to a lawyer last month, and that lawyer mailed a demand letter to my mother. I ended up leaving the house before my mom opened it, as in, gathered my essentials and stayed with a friend. My mom hired her own defense attorney immediately. The defense attorney already offered to settle from the get-go, and I'll be hearing that first settlement offer tomorrow. I've been waiting to hear it for nearly 2 weeks now. But I'm sure it'll be an extremely lowball offer, and this will be dragged out as much as humanly possible. However, we requested the journal entry from the notary that allowed all this to happen, and hopefully the notary's journal and their reply will be all that we need to permanently have the upper hand here. But just for my own sake, I need to prepare for the worst. I'm currently couch surfing, living with certain friends on some days and certain friends on other days. I have some job interviews in this upcoming week and school resumes in the next couple of weeks, so I'll be thoroughly distracted but also insanely stressed. Meanwhile, my mother is on vacation for the next 3 weeks, and I just have to remind myself that this is temporary and that I'm paying my lawyer on a contingency fee and she is paying her lawyer probably by the hour. Plus, doesn't it usually get far worse before it gets better finally? Someone please tell me yes. This comment says, I'd get the lawyer to put a lien on your mother's property as she owes you money but's not paying the debt. This would stop her from selling the property until she pays everything that you're legally owed and frees her dang spending. No P says, I don't think we've really gotten to that point where we're trying to figure out where all her money is yet. She immediately offered to settle and then, for some reason, stated, via her lawyer, that she needed 2 weeks to come up with the said offer. That first offer will be known to me tomorrow, and I'm absolutely dreading it, and that part you're talking about might come in later if she claims that she cannot pay our counteroffer, which she better not. I already know she has at least $260 grand put away in her own life insurance, and she has at least $300K in her own personal account, plus the account with my inheritance in it. I mean, if need be, we'll do what we can to find out how much money she has. Hopefully any other updates from OP are positive and they come out the deserved winner like they should be. Shared fence dispute, posted by Readily Deedle. We recently moved into a newly built home in a development that has been around for quite a few years. Our home was on the edge of the newest phase, so our property is next to a home that was built 2 years ago. For background, my husband has a friend and coworker named Calvin. Calvin actually also lives in our neighborhood and he carpools to work with my husband nearly every day. They have known each other for years. Calvin's in-laws turned out to be our new next-door neighbors, and they live directly to the right of us. When we first moved in, we initiated a fence being built with our neighbor to the left, and split the cost of the shared fence happily, as it was a joint decision and we decided to have it built at the same time. The in-laws on the right already had a pre-existing fence that was built probably before our home even started to get built. This fence borders our property. The in-laws have had Calvin ask us to pay $2,000 for this shared fence multiple times in the 5 months that we've lived here. They have never actually come to talk to us about it directly. Calvin just told them he would handle it, and he of course sides with the in-laws on the matter. They are very cold to us every time we see them, and they never want to converse. And we have just discovered it's because they think we owe them $2,000. The HOA encourages homeowners to share the cost of the fence. However, it cannot force a neighbor to share the cost if they do not wish to have it built or otherwise. My problem is that this fence has been there for 2 years, well before the house was built or we moved in, and now they're coming after us for this money and not even asking me directly for it. I don't think it's right for them to ask this, but I also want to be neighborly and protect our relationship with Calvin and his wife. I'm finding it very hard to see the fairness here. Would you pay the money and move on, or hold firm that this is an inappropriate request? The commenters got it. They say, why would you pay money for a fence that someone else built 2 years before you moved in? And take the fact that they never want to converse with you as a blessing. Firmly tell Calvin that his in-laws are nuts and that you will never pay them money for a fence that was built years before you even bought the property. I mean, this feels like I go to Walmart and I buy a bag of chips. I eat the chips on my way to your house, and then I make you pay for the chips that you never even ate or had any use of. This is silly. This story has so many plot twists and surprises that I did not see coming. You're gonna love it, I promise ya. Handicapped Karen tried to get me fired after she hits me with her electric wheelchair. Posted by Gold and Silver 61. Buckle up. When I was in college, I used to work for Walmart, initially as a courtesy clerk. The town I lived in easily exceeded 100 degrees Fahrenheit during the summer months. By state law, the store had to give us a 5-minute break inside to cool down after 2 rounds of collecting carts and provide us with beverages so we can stay hydrated. The beverage they usually gave us was Gatorade, and this is relevant to the story. After working a couple of hours, it was time for me to take my first official 15-minute break. I filled a cup with Gatorade and proceeded to make my way to the break room. There was a bit of a blind spot walking past the registers, so I stopped and looked both ways down the aisle to make sure that I wouldn't accidentally bump into anyone. The closest person to me was one of our regular shoppers, an older lady, the Karen of the story, who had amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, or Lou Gehrig's disease, the same condition Stephen Hawking had. Because of this, she had to use an electric wheelchair and lived at a local assisted living center. Due to her condition, there were 2 rules that she had to follow whenever she shopped at the store in order to prevent accidental collisions with people. First off, she must always be accompanied by an employee from the assisted living center whenever she shopped at the store. And second, she had to keep the wheelchair speed to one of the lowest settings. Knowing these rules and seeing how far down the aisle she was, I knew I could get across quick enough before she got anywhere near me. After taking a step or 2 out into the aisle, I noticed 2 things. First off, she was not being accompanied by an employee from the assisted living center, and next, she was driving her wheelchair much faster than she was supposed to. She was on a collision course with me, so instinctively I tried to jump back out of the way to avoid getting hit, but it was too late. She hits me while I was in the air. I fell to the ground and spilled my Gatorade all over her wheelchair. The lady loses control of the chair and starts spinning around in circles. She's flailed her arms and screamed with what limited mobility she had and nearly hit me a second time, but I managed to roll out of the way. I knew I had to try and stop her before she hit someone else, so I grabbed a handlebar on the back of the wheelchair, hoping I could at least slow her down. This didn't work. Instead, she dragged me around in circles in the middle of the aisle. Several coworkers and shoppers quickly rushed in and stopped the lady, who seemed to be okay, just startled. But when I tried to stand up, 2 male shoppers held me down. One of them leaned over me and said, "You're going to be all right, sir. Everything is going to be just fine." He turned his head and yelled, "I need a first aid kit." I could hear a lady in the background scream, "Oh my goodness, somebody call 911. I just laid there and wondered what the heck happened to me. Sure, I was going to have a nice bruise on my hip from when I hit the floor, but besides that, I felt fine. I quickly discovered why the customers were panicking. The flavor of the Gatorade we had that day was fruit punch. Some of it had splashed on my face when the lady hit me. The customers who witnessed the incident thought I busted my head open when I hit the ground, and I had to assure them that it was not blood, it was just Gatorade, and that I was fine. A member of management eventually showed up to document the incident. After I gave him my statement, I was finally able to take my break. I was even given an extra 5 to 10 minutes so that I could clean up and recuperate from what had just happened. This was where I thought the story would end. I was wrong. A couple of weeks later, I was called back to the manager's office. The store manager, who we'll call Kate, not her real name, and several assistant managers were in there waiting for me. Kate told me to take a seat and asked if I remembered the incident from a few weeks ago with the handicapped lady in the electric wheelchair and the Gatorade. I just chuckled and said, "How can I forget?" Kate said, "Yeah, that lady, she was just in my office, and she had a lawyer. She wanted to sue the store, claiming that she suffered mental distress from that incident. And as part of her lawsuit, she wanted your employment with the company terminated, claiming that you were the one responsible for the collision." I was speechless. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But Kate quickly put my mind at ease by saying, "Nah, don't worry, you're not in any trouble. We just showed the lady and her lawyer the security footage from the incident. I reminded her of the rules that she knew she had to follow whenever she shopped at the store to prevent collisions from happening, but she just decided to break them anyways. And that she should consider herself lucky that she hit a store employee who only suffered a minor injury, because if she had hit another customer and that customer suffered a serious injury, she would be held responsible for the collision and would have a major lawsuit on her hands. The assisted living center would also be at fault for somehow allowing her to leave the center on her own without their notice. But if she still wanted to sue, she can try, but she will not win." Karen's lawyer knew they didn't have a snowball's chance in heck of winning this one, and so the two of them left. Kate said that since I was the employee involved in this incident, she thought I would want to know what the handicapped Karen attempted to do, and that I would get a kick out of it. I'll admit, it does add a nice punchline to the story, but I wished I was in the manager's office to witness the Karen and her lawyer's encounter with Kate and the rest of the store's managers. Did I not tell you this was one of the craziest stories? I did not even picture the twists and turns that would happen next. It caught me all by surprise. Did you? I once had a neighbor call the police on me for my nighttime adventures, posted by Background Target 940. When I was about 19, I lived with my grandmother. She lived in a semi-detached house. The neighbors to our left were amazing. The neighbors from the right had only recently moved in, so we didn't know much. That was until New Year's Eve that year. My grandmother decided that she wanted to visit family that day, so she agreed for me to have a small party for the occasion at her property. Side note, we lived across from a pub. This will make sense later in the story. At around 11:45 p.m. that night, me and my friends were a little merry and were singing "Livin' on a Prayer" by Bon Jovi when I hear a very loud banging on our side door. I leave the back door as we never used the side door and started round to the front of the house to see what was going on. As I got to the gate of my backyard, I could see a male figure still banging on my door. When he heard the gate, he spun around and started towards my back gate. I'd never met this man before, but he started screaming at me about how we were being too loud and how they had a baby next door that they couldn't settle, which I wasn't aware of. When my friends heard the screaming, all music was shut off and everyone came to see what was happening. I tried to calmly apologize to this man and explain that we will turn the music down and quiet down and explain that we were just having a little get-together for New Year's and that's why it was going on so late. I'm quite a timid person when confronted with new people, so one of my male friends stood behind me to make sure that I was safe and to make sure that I was comfortable. My friend then plainly stated, "We are across from a pub that is 10 times louder than our little get-together. Maybe that could also be a reason why they were struggling getting their child to sleep." That's when the man started screaming that he was going to off us and terrible other things. All sorts. At this point, a friend of mine decided that it was best to call the police. We called them while this man stood screaming about taking out me and my friends. The police arrived and I walked to them and stated, "It's the man in the gray jumper," to which the man turned round and screamed at me, "I'm not a jumper!" At that point, the police could see how hostile this man was and removed him from the property. At that point, I was escorted into my kitchen and was asked about what happened. After telling the police what had happened, the police officer asked for 5 minutes while he checked on the man. Within 2 minutes, he came back into the kitchen and said, "Usually we would ask if you want to press charges and have him arrested, but unfortunately, he's already been arrested due to assaulting a police officer." Then, when they left, I thought everything was fine, but it wasn't. 2 weeks later, I was in my room with a friend who had been staying with me for a few weeks when my grandmother shouted to tell me that the police were here to see me. I instantly thought it was about what had happened at New Year's, but I was very wrong. When I asked the police what this was about, they said, "We've been called by your neighbors due to a noise complaint." I then asked if this was in regards to New Year's Eve, to which the police officer said, "No, we've been called out due to a noise complaint from a neighbor in regards to the past 2 weeks." I asked what they meant, as we hadn't had any complaints other than the New Year. The female police officer then took me aside and said, "Basically, one of your neighbors has apparently been round numerous times and asked you to keep the noise down at night." I explained that this wasn't true, as the only person who had been round in regards to noise was the man from New Year's. She then said, "Well, apparently you've been having extremely loud adult time and the neighbors have asked you to be a little quieter, and every time they do, you've gotten louder." At this point, me and my friend started laughing. Yes, wrong time, but we couldn't believe what we were hearing. I politely explained to the officers that the only people who live here are myself and my grandmother, and the only visitor we have had was my friend who had been staying and my parents who had visited a couple times. I explained that I had not had an adult partner in months and that I felt very disgusted that I had to explain this to police officers. At that point, the police looked extremely fidgety and they thanked me and left, not before saying, "Also, the neighbor asked that if you were ever having any kind of get-together to let them know." At that point, I knew that the man who had been round at the New Year was part of this. Now, I'm rather petty. Yes, it's not the greatest thing, but I am. So for about 6 months, until they moved out, I would write a letter to both of my neighbors, didn't want to assume, every time we had any kind of get-together, informing them that this would be happening. For example, we're having a barbecue on such a date, or we're having a children's party on such a date. My grandmother loved throwing her grandchildren parties at her home as she couldn't get out much. But I did say I was petty, so every day they would get a letter saying, "Tomorrow we'll have the postman visit." Every time my parents came around, "We're having 2 people visit at such a time on this date." Every time we had a parcel delivered, "Tomorrow we'll have a delivery man visit." It got to the point to where my neighbor's wife came to my home to apologize on her husband's behalf because he wanted the letters to stop, but didn't want to apologize as he felt he had done nothing wrong. So I explained that this was what the police had advised me and that I would happily stop if he himself asked me to. The neighbors, who were amazing on the left, found every letter absolutely hilarious, even coming out to collect them like the newspaper. Also, my grandmother was just like me. She found the letters hilarious. She found the police coming around about my adult life hilarious. That was just who she was. After they moved, we didn't have any more noise complaints, nor did we send any more letters. My grandmother lived there up to the day she passed, and I still live there now and haven't had any issues since. Nasty neighbor, posted by I Admire Hedgehogs. Got a question to post since I am completely puzzled what to do in this case. I live in a 3-story apartment on the 2nd floor. This is my 3rd year lease. I suppose I got a new neighbor on the floor above since I started hearing kids making lots of noise. Doesn't bother me much, since most of the time I'm on my PC wearing headphones. Recently, apartment management decided to do an annual inspection, and I got a notice of lease violation, trash on my balcony, and a trash bag. Well, I haven't looked outside on the balcony for probably a year. So I found a plastic plate and a Walmart shopping bag and enough of animal fur to knit a sweater. I cleaned it up to not get another notice of violation. The next day, I noticed water running from the top floor balcony with more animal hair precipitating, reported that to the leasing office. There was no response. I went to the office and I showed the pictures, and later I got an email that they addressed the issue with the neighbors. Problem is, I got more animal hair on the balcony. I went to the office to show new pictures and was told that the neighbors had a big black dog and will be getting a fine, and next time if they keep making a mess, they'd be getting an eviction. I cleaned the balcony, hoping it was the last time. Guess what? Next day I come back from work, I get 2 buckets of water flushed from the top floor and more hair dropped. Now I am really puzzled what to do. On one hand, the top resident keeps making a mess. On the other hand, I don't want to get fined myself for a mess that I don't create. Nor do I want to get people evicted, potentially losing a monthly lease. What's the best course of action? Report that to management straight up, OP. Mess with my kids? Lose your house. Posted by Outrageous Duck 164. I, a 50-year-old male, have 2 stepsons, who I just call my sons as I've been in their life since they're 8 and 10, and they're now young men. My wife and I made it a point to have a great relationship with their dad, Jason, and made sure that he had a chance to be around as much as possible, even staying at our place frequently to be around his boys, as he lived over an hour away and couldn't afford to live closer. Jason had a crazy ex-girlfriend who had tried to claim that they were married, variously saying common law, or that they were married in secret, or married on an Indian reservation. But he had a restraining order out against her because she was nuts and had tried various ways to screw up his life. The ex is a horrible person. She had been arrested several times for forgery and fraud. She and Jason had a fiery relationship, but he had it in his head that he should make it work as he did like her daughters and grandson. But the ex got him sent to prison for violating his probation when he left the county to go to his mom's funeral and hadn't filed an appropriate form. I'm a little unclear on this part, but she played a major role in it. After he got out several months later, she wanted him back and he wasn't having it. He made a clean break, moved to a new town, but she continued to harass him, thus leading to the restraining order. She would send texts to people pretending to be police investigating, saying that he was drunk driving or taking drugs, or pretending to be friends and family to spread rumors and hurt him. She even sent texts to my kids from burner phones, pretending to be other family or friends, saying awful things about their dad. Jason died unexpectedly of a heart attack, and it was a shock to all of us. He was finally living in peace, had great relationships with friends and his sons, and was the happiest that he'd ever been. He didn't have much. He lived in a single-wide trailer that a friend had let him stay in for free, some boxes of tools, old comics, video games. He had D&D books and modules, mementos from his times in the Marines, and an old 2009 pickup, which, on several occasions, he had promised my oldest son. Let's call him Paul. Jason did not have a will, and my wife became the executor of the estate because, at the time of death, both the sons were minors and the sole heirs. We packed up the things out of Jason's trailer and took the truck, which had Jason's name on the title, but we had to wait for the death certificate to retitle it in Paul's name. But the ex called Jason's sister, demanding the truck, saying it was hers, and posting on Facebook that she was reporting it as stolen and so on, which really ticks me off. After we got the death certificate, we went to the DMV and found out that she had stolen the title to the truck by forgery, saying that she was the only heir and we couldn't transfer the title. My son was driving around with a packet documenting everything in case he was pulled over for driving a stolen vehicle. We had to get a lawyer and start a special process that took several months before a director at the DMV fixed it, and we were able to title the truck with the ex, continuing to threaten and cause problems, and it made everyone miserable, and then it cost us several $1,000s in legal fees. Early last year, we got through probate court, and the ex never showed, in spite of saying that she was the wife and the sole heir. The court declared the boys as the sole heirs, and my wife as the executor of the estate in their names. Instead of showing up, the ex sent an email to the court saying that she couldn't make it because of work, she doesn't have a job, and that Jason was never around his kids. He didn't miss a single high school football game, home or away, and never missed a home track meet, and that they were just leeching off his SSI for the back child support. She went on with a bunch of other non-relevant crap just to trash my wife and sons, and pretty much said that it didn't matter what the judge said, that she should get everything. During this time, we found out that Jason's name was on the deed of the ex's house. In order to get a reduction in property taxes because of Jason's disabled veteran status, she had filed papers to put him on the deed, but not the mortgage. If she had just left my kids alone, we would have let it go, but she had pushed principal beyond the point of denial, so we filed suit for half the house. The property's worth about $380,000. We went to court-ordered mediation, and she rejected a mediated settlement of a fraction of the value, which we would have taken. In April, her lawyer dropped her, and so she got a continuance on the first hearing. She then claimed that she had found a will from Jason, designating her as the sole heir, in addition to another signed paper that she found as a quitclaim deed from Jason for the house. I did wonder if it was this or her not paying him which caused him to drop her. She was going to go back to probate court to reopen or appeal probate and needed time for that, which the judge granted. On Tuesday, finally went to court on the deed to the house. She no-showed. The judge had inquiries to the probate court and she never filed any papers. The trial lasted less than 10 minutes as the judge recorded the facts and awarded the estate half the property. They will impanel 3 lawyers to determine how the property will be sold, as she's going to lose her house and for the first time in her miserable life face the consequences of her actions. Screw around and find out. You try to be nice to somebody, they take advantage of you like that. You give them an inch, they take a mile, and eventually they get so greedy it just falls all up in their face. Way to go, OP. Karen story time. Good luck getting into your car in the morning. Posted by Fudgenearby464. So I live in an apartment in the city and we have our own parking lot, which is great as there are little to no parking spaces nearby. Up until a year ago, the individual parking spaces were not labeled, so sometimes people would just leave just enough space for your car not to fit in between. My next door neighbor, she's in her 40s I think, who is the Karen of this story, would constantly do this, which would drive me, my dad, and most of our neighbors insane. Especially since there was a section of the parking lot where you could fit 2 cars, and 2 sections where you could fit 3. She even hit my car a few times, which I personally never saw, but I did see my car paint on her car. My car is the only car that is that specific color in the entire parking lot. For some background, I'm 20 and female, and I got my driver's license in January 2022 when I was 18. Now, I may be somewhat inexperienced, but I dang well know how to fit my car into tight spaces, especially since my school's parking lot was also unlabeled and teenagers absolutely do not care to leave space for someone else to park next to them. And my classes often didn't start until 9 or 10 a.m., so by the time that I would get to school, there were either no or really tight spaces left for me to park. I know how to fit a smallish car into a very tight space. Back to the story. For 10 years that we have lived in that apartment, we've had a problem with Karen and her parking, her dad too. She drives a large SUV, while my dad and I drive a station wagon and a coupe, respectively. Karen loved to park in the part of the lot where you could fit 2 cars, but since she's a bad driver, no, she is really a bad driver, I've seen her drive, and a jerk, she would constantly park in a way that you could maybe fit a motorcycle next to her on either side. The same was with her dad up until the individual parking spaces were labeled. Her dad would actually park between the lines and you could fit a car next to his, which was surprising, but not Karen. She continued to double park. She even parallel parked a few times, taking up 3 parking spaces. After a few months, she started parking a bit better, sometimes over the line, but not in a way that my dad and I had problems fitting our cars next to her. Now, my dad and I can be extremely petty people, so even before the parking spaces were formally labeled, my dad and I would occasionally park as close as possible to her car, so she couldn't get in as easily. But you see, my dad's a big guy, 6'2", 200 pounds, so he couldn't possibly park as close as I can and still be able to get out of his car. I, on the other hand, I'm 6 feet and a measly 130, 140 pounds. Basically, I can fit into and get through extremely narrow spaces with ease. Karen is a few inches shorter than me, but at least 30 pounds heavier, so my dad parking next to her would just be an inconvenience. But me parking next to her as close as I can means that she has to enter through her passenger side door. I've seen it happen a few times since one of the windows in our apartment overlooked those particular spaces. It was hilarious every time, and she couldn't say a word to us because she got herself in that mess. Last year, I left for college and I left my car at home, and my dad drove my car more than his. And when I would go back home for the weekend or the holidays, Karen wouldn't know which one of us drove the car last, and she didn't have the guts to berate my dad. But I am certain that she would try to berate me if she ever saw me getting out of my car. For actual years, I've waited for the perfect opportunity to completely block her from getting into her car, and lo and behold, a few weeks ago, I was coming back from my boyfriend's house and I saw her car was over the line on the driver's side. The parking lot was half empty, but I gladly squeezed my car in reverse. She never parks in reverse next to hers, to the point where even I had trouble getting out. I even had to fold my side mirror so she doesn't rip it out while backing out. This would inconvenience her cause she would, yet again, have to get in from the passenger side. But when my genius of a father came back to work, he, as he told, wanted to park closer to the entrance, but caught a glimpse of my car and the proximity of it to Karen's, realized what I had done, and proceeded to back into the space on the other side of her car as close as he could without damaging her side mirror, completely blocking her in. He entered the apartment and started laughing, asking me if I did what I did on purpose and informing me of what he had done moments prior. The only part of this story that I regret is not seeing Karen's reaction to her situation in the morning and her trying to get into her car. On the bright side, I don't think I've ever seen her park over the line since then. Maybe she learned her lesson after a whole decade. This commenter says, haha, that's awesome, and this is truly as petty revenge as it gets. I mean, this idea is a classic, although I do wonder, what if Karen had an emergency? What would happen then? Weird neighbors, can I do anything? Posted by Fresh Made Dumplings. Yum. Just to preface, my family and I have been living in the same neighborhood for over 20 years now, and we've never had issues with anyone. Our neighborhood is quiet and mostly consists of older people and families. Everyone minds their own business, or they're cordial with each other. So this family moved in about 2-ish years ago, and I am 99% sure that they rent the home. The family consists of a father and, I don't even know, 6 or 7 kids? 4 or 5 of them are teenagers and young adults, and there are a few young children. I don't know if the kids even go to school because I see them all the time. I think for a living, they pick up used items and sell them, as they often do yard sales, which I don't think they're allowed to do, as we live on a major road which can be hazardous when people stop to park to buy things. Not sure if I explained that well. They always have older cars and have car troubles. I've noticed that people come to look at their cars, not sure to help them or to check out the cars before buying them. Anyways, they've gotten into an argument with the neighbors to the right of them. We know them and we grew up with them, and they're nice people, sanitation workers, and random people. They're loud, and I oftentimes hear them yelling at each other. They ride their dirt bikes around the neighborhood. I've called the cops on them a few times because of this, but obviously not much happens from that as they continue to do so. I've spoken to other neighbors about them before, and we've agreed that they're weird and give people dirty looks. I've only interacted with this family once, when one of the young kids kicked the ball onto our property, and one of the older siblings asked if I could retrieve it. Things with that family started getting worse when one evening, while I was watering my plants outside this past May, one of the older girls drove by and called me a dirty you-know-what. I have it on camera. I told my friend about it, and she suggested that I file a police report in case something happens, which I eventually did. To continue, this family is friends with this other neighbor. Let's call her Emily. I've never spoken to Emily prior to a few months ago, even though she's lived in the neighborhood for almost a decade. No beef, by the way. I've never seen much of her until this last year. I don't want this to come off the wrong way or that I'm judging her, but there is something visibly off with her, possibly drug usage. She can be erratic. One day, while I was taking a walk, Emily was walking in my direction with her dog. She confronted me, and mind you, this was my first time speaking to her besides waving hello, and said that family claimed that I accused Emily of stealing my packages and moving my sandals or something. I was in disbelief. This confirmed my suspicions that this family didn't like me, but finding out that they'd lied about me was a whole other level. First of all, none of this ever happened. Second, why would I speak badly about Emily out loud to the point where this family can hear me when I know that they're friends? Emily and I cleared the air, and she continued to tell me how this family makes fun of me because I like to sunbathe and sit outside in my bralettes. Who freaking cares? I'm not nude, I'm on my property, not bothering anyone. And they talk crap about other people in the neighborhood. Emily also told me that she has a problem with them as well because they keep manipulating her or something. This happened back in May, and since then, Emily and I have spoken a few times, but not recently, as I haven't seen her. I'm glad we cleared the air, however, I know that they're still friends to this day. It's absolutely wild to me that these people have this much hatred towards me, even though I haven't done anything to them. My home and neighborhood have always been a safe place for me, but ever since they moved in and actually harassed me, makes me feel very uncomfortable. I haven't confronted them or said anything to them, even though I want to, because they're the type of people where they have nothing to lose and they'll definitely escalate the situation. When I filed a police report and spoke to the police officer, he said that I could ask for a mediation officer to come out and speak with them, but I don't think that'll do much. And then this morning, Emily gave my brother multiple dirty looks and spoke under her breath as he was getting into his car to go to work, so now it seems like she has a problem with us. I don't know what to do. Should I continue to ignore them and be the bigger person? Should I somehow contact the homeowner and inform them of what's been going on with their tenants? And if I do, how do I go about that? And I don't think I can legally do anything as they haven't physically done anything to me. So the only legal option is to get a mediator to speak with them, which I don't care to do. Commenters say to contact the owners in your HOA if they're in one, but really could put up cameras if they were doing anything, but it sounds like they're just being bad neighbors. I hope you get out of this, OP. It sounds like a rough situation. Karen slapped and pushed me because I was ignoring her and not helping. Posted by Praveen Shankar 007. I am an 18-year-old male, born completely deaf and mute. Also, I am partially blind in my left eye. I live with my sister, 28-year-old female, who had been taking care of me since our parents died. Recently, she got married and went on her honeymoon, so I'm on my own for a few weeks. This happened yesterday. Usually, whenever I go out, I'm accompanied by my sister due to my disability. But now, since she is on her honeymoon, I had to go out alone. There was a new supermarket opened in our area, and I needed some items, so I decided to go there and grab them. Nah. My bad for wearing a red-colored shirt almost similar to the employees working there. But if you look closely, you could see that it was not the uniform. I was at the electronics section looking for some old batteries when I see an old man struggling to get some DVDs at the top shelf. Since I'm tall, well, I helped him. He thanked me, I can do lip reading, and then he went on his way. Then I began looking for the batteries. That's when I felt someone grab my left wrist. I turned around and a woman in her late 40s slapped me. She was speaking something, but I couldn't follow her lips as she spoke too fast. However, I was able to catch some words like you, ignore, job, and so on. So I signed to her that I am deaf. Apparently, this was a wrong move because she became more irate towards the signs. Again, she was yelling something, but I couldn't catch anything. So I took my notebook and started writing that I am deaf and mute. Before I could finish, she grabbed my notebook and pen and threw them away. Then she slapped me again and pushed me to the ground. Luckily, by this time, a store employee came to see what the commotion was about. He saw me on the ground and helped me up, and then he asked me what happened. Before I can sign to him, Karen starts to yell at the employee. I don't know what she said as she was not facing me. After she finished, I signed to the employee that I cannot hear or speak. Fortunately, he understood and explained this to the lady. But she is still not convinced. She tries to assault me again, but I moved away. Then I wrote and showed the employee to call the cops on her. The employee nodded and called the cops. Karen tried to run away, but the security caught her. The police arrived in about 10 minutes. They first talked to the employee who explained the situation about how Karen assaulted me because she mistook me for a store employee. One police officer comes and speaks to me. I understood that he wanted my version of events, so I wrote everything down and showed it to the officer. Then they went to check the CCTV footage, and they came back and asked me if I wanted to press charges. I gladly said yes. Karen was then placed in handcuffs and given a free ride at the back of a police cruiser. The manager then explained to me that Karen thought I worked there and she became angry that I ignored her. She had been standing on my left side, so obviously I couldn't see her. The store manager then offered me a 50% discount on the products. I texted my sister about the events that happened and she was livid. Oh, did I mention that my sister is a lawyer? She told me that she herself will be handling the case and would see to it that Karen would get the maximum time. Court date is in around 40 days. I will update about it after court. Edit. I noticed many were asking about masks. She was indeed wearing one, but during that encounter she had it on under her chin and not covering the nose or mouth. Also, lawyers in India can represent their family in court as long as they are not directly involved in it and the judge is not a relative to the lawyer. A neighbor hit my car and lied about it, so I ruined 300 pounds of meat while he was on vacation, posted by Valadian. This happened about 5 or 6 years ago. For some context, my neighbor, we'll call him Chester, is your stereotypical weekend outdoorsman type. He owns at least 10 different baseball caps and they all have camo on them. He's one of those. He drives a Jeep, which will be important later, and usually spends his weekends either hunting, fishing, or prepping for when the bombs drop. I tried to explain to him once that we were within the fallout range of a major city, so if it got hit, we'd be screwed either way, but whatever. Everyone needs a hobby, and some people's is collecting canned peaches. 2 weeks before the revenge, I came outside to see my car had a broken window on the passenger side, and that part of the frame was dented just above the door handle. I can tell immediately from the size and the shape of the dent exactly what it was from. As I said, my neighbor, Chester, drives a Jeep, and mounted on his front grille is a cable winch that he uses for pulling stumps and whatnot. It juts out almost 1.5 feet in front of the bumper and is made of solid metal. Anyone with a picture of the winch and the shape of the dent in my car could CSI that crap just from eyeballing it. The dent is almost identically shaped and situated at the same height the winch was mounted. On top of that, Chester lives directly across the street from me, and he likes to back into his driveway. Conveniently enough, my car is always parked on the street, so he has ample opportunities to hit it. I asked Chester about it, and without saying anything, he shook his head while biting his lip like some clueless cartoon character. I then asked if anyone who borrowed his car might have done it, because the winch itself was pretty scratched up, almost like he's been ramming it into things all over town. Again, Chester silently shakes his head and then tries to tell me it was probably teenagers. No exposition, mind you, he just blamed it on the teenagers. I was fuming, but I kept my composure and went home to call the police and my insurance company to report it. I managed to get a competent police officer who told me point blank that it was clear what happened, but without a witness, it would be pointless to try and prove it. The insurance agent was equally certain of Chester's guilt, but ended up recommending that I pay out of pocket for the repair. Since I was parking on the street, it was a factor the insurance company might use against me if I filed the claim. When it came time for them to recalculate and adjust my monthly rate, I could see a significant increase. A few hundred out of pocket right now could save me several hundred a year going forward if my rate was increased due to my own negligence, which is what the claim would, unfortunately, be categorized as. Raw deal for sure, but at least he was honest with me. Fast forward to 2 weeks later, Chester and his family are going up north to rough it in nature for a week, and despite my cold attitude towards him in recent days, he asked me to keep an eye on his house while he's gone, since I'm the only person in the neighborhood that he trusts apparently. I agreed to do it, not because I had any type of revenge in mind, but because he gifted me a large case of beer for my service. His one request was that I call him if we have any extreme weather, because he'd need me to check up on something. 2 nights after he left, we had a nasty storm. Wind and hail and even a few rolling blackouts. The next morning I called Chester to ask what he needed me to check on, but he didn't answer. Knowing Chester, he'd probably set up camp in some rural part of America with no dang cell phone service, even though he asked me to call him if this happened. After a few failed attempts, I went over to his house to inspect for any potential issues that might have arisen from the weather. I figured he was probably worried about his garage flooding, since his yard was frequently a moat after heavy rain. I went into the garage and there was no flooding, but something caught my eye immediately. 4 large freezer chests lined up side by side, taking a huge chunk of the wall up. I peeked inside one and I immediately realized what Chester was worried about. All 4 of them were packed from floor to lid with meat. Some of it was still in packages from the grocery store, and some of it was wrapped in butcher paper, likely game picked up from Chester's hunting exploits. But on top of one of the freezers was something else that seemed out of place. It was a red Solo cup full of frozen water with a penny sitting on top. I thought that was weird and dismissed it immediately, but curiosity got the better of me later that day when I got home. I decided to Google it, and what I learned instantly clicked as a way to get the ultimate revenge on Chester for hitting my car and sticking me with the repair bill. There's an old life hack that people used to use when they went on vacation. You freeze a cup of water and then place a penny on top of it and stick it in your freezer. If your power goes out, the water will eventually melt and the penny will fall to the bottom of your cup. If you return home and the penny is at the bottom of the cup, your freezer was off for an extended period of time, and now everything in it has potentially defrosted and become unfit for consumption. I immediately got up and ran back to Chester's garage to scope out the legitimacy of my nefarious deed. As luck would have it, Chester's circuit breaker was hidden behind a tool shelf, not directly visible to the naked eye. Who would put a shelf in front of a circuit breaker? Chester, of course. So I promptly took the cup out of the freezer and sat it on Chester's porch to let it get a little sun. After a few hours, the ice had melted enough that the penny slipped right to the bottom of the cup. I then put the cup back in the freezer, being very careful to position it exactly where it was when I took it out, before moving on to the last phase of my insidious plan. I started blowing up Chester's phone with calls and frantic text messages. "Chester, where is your circuit breaker? I can't find it and your power is off. Get back to me ASAP." I did this countless times over the next 2 days before I finally got a call back from Chester. He told me immediately where to go in his garage to find the circuit breaker, which, of course, I already knew thanks to my prior detective work. I sat the phone down and flipped the circuit breaker twice. Once to turn it off, and then a second time to turn it back on, giving it just enough time to mess with the digital clocks on all his appliances. And with that, my revenge was complete. All that was left was for Chester to come back home, which took another 2 days. When Chester got back home, I was nervous, but eager to see if my charade had worked. The next day, I got a knock on my door. It was Chester. He asked me if I wanted some meat to give to my dogs. Apparently, the power had been off for too long, and all the meat in his freezers had thawed out while he was gone, so he was throwing it out. I asked him how much he had, and he said it was probably somewhere close to 300 pounds. He didn't want to waste it all, so he asked if I wanted to give some to my dogs. I graciously helped myself to roughly half a freezer's worth of meat, some of which I stored in my own fridge, and the rest Chester was nice enough to offer to hold on to in his freezer until I needed it. The kicker is that Chester had no idea the meat actually never defrosted and was still perfectly good. That night, I helped myself and my dogs to a couple of nice steaks, courtesy of old Chester himself, who was still busy walking the neighborhood unloading the tainted meat on anyone who had a cat or dog that might want it. It was at least 4 or 5 months before me and my dogs went through all the meat that Chester had given us. I don't know if I made all my money back for the repairs on my car, but I didn't have to buy any meat for many a fortnight. He literally probably cost Chester over $1,000 of damage. I mean, 300 pounds of meat, that's a lot of a cow right there. What do you think? New neighbor walks into our house because she knew the previous owner. Posted by Feman26, Iron Man. The cast is me, fiance, my dad, and the entitled neighbor. So this happened 2 years ago when my fiance and I bought our townhouse. Here's some backstory. We found a townhouse for sale in a complex. It was in our price range, but it needed some work. mainly the basement. On the disclosure, the previous owner stated that the basement had flooded a few years previously. However, the basement was carpeted and it had never been replaced or cleaned, so it smelled mildewy. The way the house is set up, there are 2 entrances, the front door and a door in the basement, both with doorbells. The basement was in 2 sections, an office and a playroom with the outside door. Now this is relevant for later. Okay, back to the story. I took a week off work and my fiance was only able to take 2 days off so that we could start cleaning and prepping our new house. First full day, we had cut the basement carpet out and started scraping the glue off the floor. When my fiance was back at work, I was there alone cleaning. My father is a bit of a handyman and he was really excited about us getting a house, so he was going to come down and help us. I was in the basement sweeping and cleaning, and because of the amount of dust, I left the door to the outside open and then went into the office to start cleaning in there, and that's when my father calls. Here's how I remembered the conversation going. "Hi, Dad." "Hey, kiddo, how's the new place?" "I need some work." "I am about to leave here. Do you need me to bring any tools down?" I turned to leave the office. "Oh no, I don't think so. Oh my goodness, who are you?" There, in the middle of the other section of the basement, was a strange woman, just standing there looking slightly disgusted by the mess. I nearly dropped my phone from the shock of a random person in our house. "Hi, I'm the entitled neighbor. I live in the unit over there." Me, still in shock and extremely confused. What are you doing here?" Karen replies, "I know the previous owner." What?" "You know you shouldn't leave this door open. Squirrels can get in." She then walks out the door, closing it behind her. I'm still in shock and I'm looking like a trout with my mouth open. I snap out of it when I hear my dad still on the phone. "Hello, is everything okay?" "I think I just met our neighbor." My fiance and I had a good laugh about it later. Now here's some more backstory about the previous owner and the people in the complex. So there were 3 units for sale and we picked the one that was in our price range and we liked the size too. One of the other units was Squirrel Lady's, and from what I was told by the HOA, she has since retired and moved to Florida. The other couple that was selling their unit was very nice and they've also moved. But before they left, they told us the previous owner was not well liked and was a total Karen. Her only friend was Squirrel Lady and they had both been living here for over 15 years. Nah, I don't think the previous owner moved because people didn't like her. She was at least 80 when we met, and the townhouse has 2 flights of stairs. Her being fed up with the place is probably why she shouted, "I'm done," and ran out. And strangely enough, Squirrel Lady was right. We did end up having problems with squirrels. We even got a flying squirrel in our house once, but that's another story. Terrible Karen neighbor story time, and guess what? They live in an HOA. It's called Fool Me Twice, Screw You, posted by PLang67. About a month ago, my neighbor, who I have always gotten along with and am now friendly with, despite her entitled behavior, told me that she wants to add purple streaks to her hair. She asked my opinion because I'm a licensed cosmetologist, but no longer work in the field due to health reasons. My neighbor has money, and her financial situation is very comfortable, and she can easily go to a salon to get her hair done. But because she is high risk and refuses to get vaccinated, they want to put a tracking chip in her, she's not kidding, she won't go to a salon. I explained the process of adding purple streaks to her hair is labor intensive and requires that she bleach her hair first to a light yellow and then tone with a light purple color. 2 months ago, she dyed her hair black with box color. Box color is the crap that you can buy retail and not professional hair color. It's crap because they will add things like metallic dyes to the color, and bleaching may literally make your hair melt off your head. Bleaching after using box color ends with questionable results, but she did not listen to me. I told her to buy a California cap, which is a rubber cap, and pull the hair through that she wants to bleach, what bleach to buy, which volume developer, and how to pick her purple color and developer for the toner. I also told her there was no way I could do her hair. I can't stand up long due to my condition to help her. I stressed this several times. Instead, I helped her write down everything, and she seemed okay with it, and said her friend was going to help her. I wished her good luck and promptly forgot all about it. I forgot until the Memorial Day weekend when she called me in a panic, screaming her hair was all messed up, and I had to come help her. I hobbled my way to her place, and when I get there, I see a plastic highlighting cap in her hand. not the one I told her to buy, and the friend looking confused. Her hair was in no way messed up. They hadn't done anything. My entitled neighbor starts ranting how the cap wasn't working, how it pulls too much hair through, how the hook to pull the hair was stabbing her head, and how I had to do her hair for her right now. She put me on the spot and kept the pressure on until I agreed to foil her hair for her. I just wanted to keep the peace, as she is close to the HOA board members and my next door neighbor. I have seen what she does to people who tick her off, and I didn't want to cause a scene. So I stood there in a considerable amount of pain and foiled her hair and toned it. She was happy, and I thought that was the end of it, so I left. She called me the next day and demanded that I come back and add more highlights because she said it wasn't enough. By now, I was ticked. The first time, I did it to myself by not embarrassing her in front of her friend. This time, she is most definitely taking advantage of me and acting like a brat. I went to her place again to tell her that I would add a few foils, but she needed to keep an eye on the collar and finish it herself. She was not happy with me at all. I again explained how I could barely stand and was having difficulty keeping my balance. She looks me dead in the face and says, "What? Is this about money? I didn't offer to pay you the last time, and now you're mad?" No. It's because you're selfish and don't listen. I can't help you anymore after I finish this." I placed her foils, set the time, and left. She was whining later in the day that her hair was all screwed up in a text. I asked for a picture and an explanation. She stated that she wanted a purple streak in the back at the bottom, so when she pulled her hair up in a ponytail, you would see the purple. Her friend bleached it. After all, it clearly wasn't that hard to do, right? Ha! But they didn't leave it on long enough, and they turned her hair Ronald McDonald orange. I told her, "Sorry, I can barely stand, and I can't keep my balance. Just bleach it again until it turns light yellow. Wash it, towel it, dry it, and then tone it. Good luck." And now she is not speaking to me. I guess I should have led with the nope the first time instead of going over. No good deed goes unpunished, ever. Screw her. Click my next crazy HOA Karen compilation on your screen to continue your listening session. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you in the next one.